Hey, this is Renee, and you're watching Making Potions Part 10! And this is literally the last time I can do that. I'm out of fingers now. See what I can do next. Alright. As usual, I'm going to start with the more general things. I have found that project management is something good and easy, and it comes easily to me, like managing people in regards to making sure they get stuff done, or giving them all the tools they need to get stuff done and figuring out what appropriate timelines are. Like, that's cool. However, I've never had really the job of being like an employer or a boss. And that's way more stressful because you have people who are contacting you who want a job, who you would love to give a job to, but you don't have the money, or you get some misinformation and then it's really hard like figuring things out. Like, that's way more stressful than I thought it would be. And going through like 50 artist applications is really stressful, especially as someone who's not particularly well versed in the arts. So that's interesting. I can now see why companies have an HR department and department leads. But unfortunately, I am the HR department and I am the department leads and everything. So it's cool because I have direct control over those things, and it's not cool because I have to control those things. It can be a little stressful, but everything's going along fine in regards to that. Fortunately, it has taken up a considerable amount of my usual development time, which is unfortunate, but I've still made good progress. I've also been really researching into what makes crowdfunding launches successful, and I'm getting a little stressed out because it seems like what you need to do is build up a good following and a bunch of hype before you start. And what you should do is get as much money on day one as possible. And that's kind of stressful. So I need to work on that. I think the main thing I need to do to give a community a place to develop is to create a forum on my website. So that means I need to actually make my forum live. Right now, my website live. Right now, my website is a just like HTML files on a website, which is funny because I get to see people trying to like assume I'm running PHP and get into my like admin controls. Sorry, it doesn't have PHP on it yet. You can't do that, and I wouldn't use generic passwords anyway. That's what they all try to do. Sorry, I have too much fun reading through my server logs. I came from doing tons of server development. Anyway, this is going to be a short video, so let's go into buffs. Buffs are awesome. I decided to implement buffs a lot in the same way that I was developing uh, like potions themselves. So they all follow a structure, and that structure has and like well more like the item structure. So that structure has a name, a display name, a description, flavors. I'm not using descriptions or flavors yet, but I assume that I might want to have a thing where if there's a debuff on something, you can view what that debuff is, or if there's a buff on something, you can view what that is. And so that's why I kept add that in there. It doesn't hurt if it's not filled in. And then I added in, let's see, different concepts, which I'm going to pull up. I'm going to pull up my buffs. So, let's switch over to Visual Studio. This is a slow area, and it uses the slowing debuff. So if I go to my buff manager here, I will see that my buff struct, yes, there's a lot of code that I commented out and decided not to use, simply has, as I said, the name and flavor stuff, and then it has, if it's a stackable, which is really important, what stat it's going to modify, how it's going to modify it, I'll go over that in a minute, the amount it's going to modify it by, and the duration of the modification. So when I say the modify type, I'm referring to this lovely formula that I was provided with, where you have add buffs to the base sum, then you have multiply adds where you add all your multiply adds together, and then multiply products where you multiply the multiply products and then multiply them by the multiply adds and then multiply the base value plus the adds times all that. That way you can say, oh, I want this value to only give plus 50 whenever. And so you can just put that here, or you can say, oh, well, I want this value to make you twice as strong, but if you get 2 of them, I only want it to make you 4 times as strong instead of 8 times, or, well, that's bad. If you get 2 that do 4, I only want it to do 8 times as strong and not 16 times as strong. Sorry, I picked the worst example. Or if you get 2 that give you plus 100%, that it gives you 200% versus not. Anyway, ta-da! This is how they work. And then in the slow area here, I just have this as a public buff, which means I can define it within my prefab of the area which I am putting that on. So one of the important things about how these buffs work, especially the non-stackable ones, is in regards to the calculations of them. And if I go to my stats page here, what I had to do was add in 2 values for each object, the base value and the current value, so attack, base attack, defense, base defense, and even on speed. Now I only did recalculations of the speed value, but I plan to put in the other ones. And what my update here now does, so every frame I'm checking to see if I have a recalculation required. That means if I put a new buff on, I can say requires recalculation. And then I have a list of the buffs here, and I put them on in order of their time. So their time of removal. And if the first buff is not valid, then I'll remove the first buff and say it needs to recalculate. And then it goes back and checks the second buff, and if it needs to remove the second buff, it does. It requires recalculation. And then when it recalculates, it goes through this lovely recalculation of stats, which is going to get much bigger. I don't know if there's a better way to do this, but this only deals with speed right now. So it starts out with the base speed values, always your add, your multiply add, and your product are going to start at 0, 1, 1, respectively. And then it goes through and says, okay, is this the right buff that I'm supposed to be modifying? What type am I modifying by? And then it just adds them all together. And then at the end uses this recalculate speed and recalculate pat speed, since I have 2 speeds which are affected by slows. I may want to have some spells that only affect 1. I left it up here so I can change that. And then this is the simple formula which is going to be used for pretty much everything. I don't know if there's a better way to do this, because I couldn't figure out how to put in like a pointer to that value instead and then modify them all similarly, but hey, it works. So this is what I have right now. Cool, so those are buffs, and I'm going to show you that they work. Yeah, Unity. What I have this set up right now is I have this lovely little casting test blob here, as I believe you've seen before. He's got stats. He's not going to move. Yeah, his max speed, he might move. Alright, we'll see. He shouldn't move. No, yeah, I took off his hop. His hop is disabled, so he's not going to move even though he has a speed. He has a script here that is going to shoot a spider shot, which is going to lead to a spider web. If we look at the spider web prefab here, we will see that it has a slowing debuff on it, which is called slow. It movement slowed, it has a flavor, and different things here. And I might make a list of debuffs and buffs and then just say slow is the debuff and put it on there. That's modification which can be done very simply in the future. Currently not implemented yet though. And you'll notice that the duration isn't defined here yet. but the duration and the strength and all are defined, as mentioned before, on the casting script itself. Now, though this has a duration of 5, if you look in my actual slowing code, you'll see that the effective duration of the buff is not 5, it's like 0.2. And the reason it's 0.2 is because this is slowing in an area. I want you, when you leave the area, for the buff to fall off. So it's a really short time that it applies it on you, but large enough that it will last more than 1 frame, so you won't have it going off on, off on, off on. And now let's show it. So I get hit, you see I'm slowed there, and oh, got missed. Come on, hit me. Yep, and move faster afterwards. So yay! Now, if you noticed, when I'm getting hit, the object is actually like going off not in the center of the projectile and not in the center of the object that I'm hitting, but in the contact point. And that really hadn't been an issue when I was using potions, because the potion effects that I was using were quite small, and you were exploding in the middle of the potion itself wasn't that noticeable as a bad thing. In fact, it might be considered a good thing. However, when I had this really long projectile that I was using, if the effect started in the center of the projectile when it triggered against the girl, then the spiderweb effect was off to her side instead of really on top of her. And yeah, she hit the corner of it, but it didn't seem like she just got hit with a spiderweb. Now, if I then tried to make it in the center of her body, but when it goes off in the center of her body and it hits her like barely on her head and then explodes out from her stomach, that sounds gruesome, it just doesn't look right. So I went through and I found that on I'll switch over. On my collider calculations here, where I get a collision 2D, the collision 2D actually has a dot point on the contact point, and that can be interpreted as a vector 2, and then I expanded my effect trigger to take in a contact point and then use that as the effect center. Simple enough. Took me a little while to figure out, but it works great. The other thing which I added was a visual cooldown. Now, what I mean by visual cooldown is you can't throw a potion until so many seconds after you've thrown your last potion. There is a cooldown before you can throw another one. I think that makes the game feel better, else you're just like spamming potions or whatnot. It also gives you a little bit more of a panic because you throw a potion, you're like, ah, run away! I have to run away before I can throw another one. However, the fact that there was a cooldown was not really obvious to anyone playing the game because there is no visual representation. There's also no visual representation of the cast time, but there will be when the girl is animated. So with the visual representation of the cooldown, what I decided to use is just when you throw a potion, all of your potion buttons like turn into white, and then they sort of clock back the image, or they fill in the image radially around the center of the potion that was there. So it looks, a number of MMOs and other games use the same cooldown effects. I found that it really helps visually, but who knows, I made the game, so I think everything I do is awesome, right? How I implemented that was a little difficult because my base potion bar, my base action bar, doesn't actually have a image type on it. So if I go to my action bar here, the action bar image where I'm going to be putting this, since I don't have a source image, I can't use the image type. Now if I hit play and pause this quickly, you'll see that I suddenly get an image type here. As soon as you attach an image to an object, it can have an image type. But before you attach that, you can't really set it, that I have found. Thus, I went into my code and changed it so that when I go through and put in these images, that I also change what they look like. So when I update the action bar button, I go through here and I change the type to filled, the fill method to radial 360, and the fill amount to 1, which means it's completely filled. Now, when I want something to go on to cooldown, I have a cooldown on thing here, which is triggered by the girl behavior script, which has our own cooldown on it, but I wanted this to be set separately instead of referring to it. And here, when her cooldown timer starts, she tells the cooldown timer on the bar to start, sets the start time to the current time, and tells it how long it's going to take to cool down. Then my UI here simply uses an update calculation if it's on cooldown that changes the fill amount of the bars depending on the ratio of the time left to the total cooldown. That's how it fills in nicely. So if I go back here to the game, you'll see that if I pull out a potion and throw it, get that nice cooldown effect. And if I consume a potion, again, the same cooldown. And I think that's a really nice visual to have. Yay! So that's been my progress. I implemented buffs and I implemented cooldowns. But I ran into an interesting problem when implementing cooldowns. The first problem I ran into was that I was initially trying to change the wrong UI code. I was trying to change the equipment bar UI manager, and it was the equipment UI manager. So perhaps I didn't properly name things. I ended up changing the wrong code for a while and then being confused as to why nothing was working. Debug.log is your friend. Then I ran into an issue where my buttons had suddenly become non-interactable and grayed out. And I didn't know why. And I went through the buttons themselves and there was nothing checked that said they shouldn't be interactable. I couldn't find anything in my code that would be doing that. And this is why we use source control. So if I haven't ground this into you guys, source control is awesome. Use Git or something similar, Perforce, I don't even care. Just something where you have version control. So what I did when this messed up is I just stashed the changes I had made, went back, checked to make sure that everything was working, then applied each change by itself. I did this by hand. I could have probably unstashed them and then stashed others back. And then it worked. So something in that stash was bad. I didn't implement whatever's bad. I fixed everything. Everything worked. I didn't have to spend too much time on it. And it's all because I had source control that I didn't have to delete things and lose all of my progress randomly until I fixed it. So, source control. It's important, especially because you can go back and change things that you did forever ago and realize what the changes were, etc. Yeah. Sorry. So what I'm going to do next is I'm working on level design. Yay! For my demo level. Yes, this is terrible. I have no clue what I'm doing. The level that I'm currently designing, I think I start out with harvestables near the entrance and then other things that are less scary further off, and then it gets more and more scary until you get to the exit. You can pick mushrooms at the beginning and they're just mushrooms, but near the exit you go to pick the mushrooms and they jump out of the ground and try to eat your face. That's pretty cool in my opinion. I have no clue how this is going to feel. I just wanted to draft out something. And I was told that the best way to design a level is to make it and then to just polish it. So that's what I'll be doing. I'm trying to have sort of a goal in mind. That's why I start off with harvestables are easy. This one monster. I was gonna say boss, and then this one monster is easy to fight. Maybe I'll fight him. And then near the end, you're like, oh god, there's so many monsters. What do I do? I'm just gonna run. Which is the correct response. That's what I'm trying to get out of people. And again, I'll adjust it. and hope that I can find that perfect medium. So obviously level design is one thing. That's something I probably should work on a little bit each day and then sleep on, think about it. feel feel it out with fresh eyes and gamer hands every day. So in the meantime, while I'm working on that, I'm also going to be working on some things which I require in the game which have not yet been implemented but are not 100% necessary for the demo. Those are going to be held item limits. So the inventory that she has on her is going to be limited to a certain number of items and a certain number of types of items. So like let's say you can't hold over 100 items or 50 items in your backpack, and you can't have over 20 different types of items or something like that. What I want is, I don't want you to have to say, oh no, I found a really rare item. Do I have to drop this entire stack of common items, and is this rare item worth that? I want to say, no, I can drop one of this stack of common items, but I want to discourage having like one of everything in there. So there's going to be that limit I have to implement. I don't think it'll be hard, but who knows? I'm then also going to implement exploratory crafting. Exploratory crafting is going to be where, quite like our equipment bar, if you recall, you are going to be able to click on a crafting slot and select an ingredient from all of your ingredients which are valid. I don't let you have completed potions, like potions of the highest level of which they can be upgraded, or quest potions. You can't accidentally murder those by using them as ingredients, so yay. But I'll let you use anything else. And then 3 items total. At that point, I'm going to disable or enable the craft button. You hit craft, and my program's going to have to go through all of the recipes which are discovered and not discovered, find out if that item combination that you put in is one of those recipes. If so, it's going to make sure that that recipe is marked as discovered, and it's going to produce that item. So quite like crafting, but a little bit more complicated. Well, current crafting. Yeah, so that's certainly going to occupy me for a while. And that's where my development's going thus far. So thanks for tuning in. I hope to catch you next time. Bye!